And record. All right. So, welcome back to my channel. Lindsay Daniels is a director, creative director, motion designer extraordinaire. My favorite motion designer, actually. I don't know if you know that. You're absolutely my favorite motion designer I've ever
Oh,
worked
thank
with.
you.
Seriously. But yeah, you have designed and directed and co-directed some really cool title sequences in your career. Um, so your first one was Dexter. Was that your first title sequence ever, or was that just kind of your breakthrough title design?
No, I would say that would be my like breakthrough title sequence. You know, I was working full time at Digital Kitchen at the time and had kind of found myself in this pretty unique role at that moment in time, where I wasn't um I'm not really a good animator. Like I'm not an animator. Like I don't like my that just wasn't my gift. And so at that moment in time, I was pitching on a lot of stuff. And so we had a lot of opportunities. You know, it was at the height where Digital Kitchen had just kind of come off the 6 feet under wave. And so a lot of, and there weren't as many companies in that facet of just like motion design. And so we had a lot of opportunities to pitch on fantastic shows. And so I had pitched on other work, but Dexter was kind of the first bigger kind of, you know, Showtime was the client, and so it had a lot of exposure, and so that was the first one that the idea, the storyboard that I had designed and the concept that I had developed kind of rose to the top, and they bought that idea.
So when you designed that for Dexter, were those boards the only ones you pitched, or had you developed other ideas? How did that go?
So at Digital Kitchen, the way that they would kind of approach it was they would have a team of designers that each kind of developed their own concept, and you'd go through the process of designing and kind of pitching ideas. And I had actually started off with a very different idea that kind of dealt with I don't know if you watch the pilot, like he uses this string thing.
Mm.
Anyways, like, so I had developed a different idea, and I had developed what we now know as the main title to Dexter, with the kind of mundane morning routine, but filmed in a way that made these very kind of everyday things feel incredibly violent, because it was kind of channeling his perspective on the world. And so I had approached our midpoint, as we called it, with like two different ideas. And that one, like everyone started like tossing out these ideas, and like obviously there was a lot of energy around that concept. And so that was the one that I kind of developed and that we pitched to Showtime.
Cool. So what did Showtime, like what information did they give you about the show that led you to that idea? You got to see the pilot, but what other information did they have about like the show going forward? What gave you that idea?
Well, it's funny because you know you are, and this is what I love about main title design, is that really all you get is, like, at that time, was the pilot. And so, and I remember the other information that we got was that his character is not Jekyll and Hyde. He's not this, like, you don't see that like bipolar aspect of him. It's just him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was pretty much the information that we got. We watched the pilot and we got that like note that he's not Jekyll and Hyde. And you as a designer kind of walk away with that, and try to distill down a character or a story, or it's that interpretation, right? It's that to me the design, um your role as a designer is absolutely less about like, okay, it's not the aesthetic design from a, what is the typeface, what is the composition, what is the, like maybe some of the more like art direction aspects of design. It's absolutely the idea, the concept platform, the notion of distilling something down in an unexpected way and formatting it into a story that's going to resonate with people emotionally, but the emotional, like, it's like you have to get to that emotional level in a conceptual way. And in that, like, I wanted people to like watch that and like feel this like visceral, like aversion to something that they'd never felt like that about. And so that was like the concept to it too.
What are you looking for?
I'm trying to find my notebook. I've kept all my notebooks from school till now. And trying to see if I can find my one from Dexter.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I don't think I can find it in my collection, but yeah, it was kind of a crazy mind map that got me there.
So what exactly was your like role on Dexter? Like what was your title for that project? I'm just curious.
My title for that was designer.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And so, just like any project in, in our world, like there's multiple people that make it work. Right. So yeah, so at that point, like I was the designer, which really which for me meant like I, came up with the idea, and designed the storyboards and wrote the treatment, which, the treatment for that kind of pitch was probably like a 2-paragraph. It was really, it's really short, it's concise, it says, this is the idea. It kind of walks you through maybe an emotional, like, steps you through what you will see, and how what you see will make you feel, like using just like descriptions that feel, that reflect what you would be watching. And, from there, then, so Eric Anderson was the creative director on that project. And then there's Paul Matthias, who's kind of the owner of Digital Kitchen. They were both like in the pitch, Showtime facing. So I was, not on those calls or anything. And so they kind of sold the idea through. And then the project was actually, I think they filmed it down in Los Angeles. And I believe it could have been Chicago, because it was a tabletop shoot, like in many ways, like there were, shots with Michael C. Hall, but the majority was, close-ups of coffee grinders and orange juices. It was right. Like very like intimate shots. And so, yeah. And then Josh Bodnar was the editor on it. And then we had a fantastic piece of music by Rolf Kent. And I don't even know, I think Digital Kitchen, I think maybe Showtime connected us to him. But yeah, so there were all of these people that were kind of, involved throughout the process, and things did evolve and become better over time. And then I also kind of came in towards the end of the editorial process to help with the typography, and do the type design, which was kind of larger and, like just bold red type. In many ways it was pretty simple, but
right. Sometimes simple things are the hardest to design. Like people, I know I fight this urge of like it has to be really complicated to be interesting, and sometimes really simple and clean is actually the more interesting and the more impactful way to go with things. So Dexter won an Emmy, right? So your team got an Emmy for that project.
Right. So that year was a creatively gifted, blessed year, I guess, because that year we also, the television, it was a mini series on ABC called The Path to 9/11, was also developed that year. And that was another one of my storyboards that won, and or was bought out of the collection that was presented. And so, and that piece was like so different than Dexter. powerful in its own way. Like, it's still honestly one of my favorite pieces that I've made, or was a part of making, because it, was, a really emotional piece, really, just introducing the world to New York City, on the morning of 9/11, before the World Trade Centers were attacked. And so, at that time when we developed, there hadn't been a lot of content around 9/11. So it's a very sensitive thing. And the process that we took to develop it was incredibly collaborative. It was like there was this nugget of an idea, and the boards were developed, but it required a group of people to go out to New York City and shoot. And like literally, like we were like driving around in a van, being like, okay, yeah, let's stop here, and we would like pop out of the van and like shoot some stuff. And then when we got back, to edit it, we were filming stuff off of the television. It was really experimental, and so that piece was also nominated for an Emmy in the same year. And so I had two title designs that were nominated for an Emmy on the same year, and Dexter won. And so it was very surreal, very cool moment.
I bet.
So Dexter premiered in 2006, and fast forward a few years, you did the title sequence for Shameless and The Killing. Which one of those came first?
So Shameless and The Killing, those were both with Erin Swarovski out of Swarovski Design. And she used to work at Digital Kitchen, and that's where we met. And she and I, she's just an awesome person and an amazing designer. And I think those were like actually really close in time, because I think it was Shameless that was first, actually. And then The Killing was right on the heels of it. Mm-hmm. And it could have been the opposite way, honestly.
Who can remember? Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you co-directed the Shameless one and directed The Killing, is that right? Or
No. So co-directed the Shameless one, and it was kind of co-directed The Killing one too, honestly. So, Erin had, the opportunity to pitch on both of those titles and shows, and we ended up kind of making them together and directing them together. It was a really collaborative process and really fun. Like those are, those are just some fantastic projects, and they're very different. It's like The Killing or the Shameless title is a locked off shot.
Yeah.
It's like a locked off shot. We rebuilt the bathroom, went down to LA and shot it, and we're working with like William H. Macy and Emmy Rossum, who are like super pros, and you're like, can you just sit on the toilet, like sounds like there wasn't but it was the idea has held up, right? And in many ways, and then The Killing was wildly different, right? Like a totally different notion. But the Shameless, it's like, I think that series is still on, and it's that, and that was one that was really hard to like get to that idea, get to that core. Yeah, because I think there was so many great, like, I don't know, great things that you could play with in that world that they had. Like, it's like this, the world of the Gallaghers is so crazy and wild. Like, there's so many like different things that you kind of want to explore and play with, and like, and so you do, but nothing like quite like rose to the top or felt right. And then I think it was when I like took a break and like went to the bathroom, and I was like,
appropriate.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it's like this, you know, that idea, that notion that this family just had no personal space, right? And they're all on top of each other. And they like, you know, they are dealing with this crazy life and this a lot of challenges. And the only personal space they could have is in the bathroom.
To an extent.
Yeah, right. Or like it was their only private space because everything else was shared. And like that was the idea, right? And that was the core idea. And so it's, you know, main titles, it's like they have to be able to like attach to something that is big enough that can carry you through years. I mean, that's like, I mean, it's like what, like 8 years now?
Yeah. And they've never changed that title sequence.
Not that I know of. And so it's like, so that's the hard thing about title design is that you have to be able to, in one episode, latch onto an idea that's big enough to carry it through an entire like life of the series, the evolution of the character. Like you have to get so deep into who that character is or what the character of the show is. That you are so in the heart of it that no matter what direction the show like offshoots to, that your core idea will remain intact.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard thing about it, is that you have to get that deep.
Yeah, figure out what that heart of the show is going to be for the whole run of the show. Yeah. So you did The Killing the same year, and you guys, the title sequence is the only part of the show that was actually shot in Seattle, is that correct?
I think so, yeah, because it was shot in Vancouver, and I think, you know, in many ways, like that was like to live in Seattle, right? Like I felt kind of like a bit in the know, where I was like, oh, I know where Discovery Park is. Like, all of these things that were important narratives in the show for the first thing, like for the first episode. Or the pilot, felt very connected to and very familiar with, and I knew that, yeah, like if the main character was driving from one place to another, she would be passing over these drawbridges, and she would be going from the heart of the city, and I knew what that looked like and felt like, and I knew what, when you drive through that, when it's pouring down rain, what that feels like, and the, you know, the meditative nature of rain on your car and the windshield wipers and all of these things that are a part of the canvas of my life actually influenced that show title, because that was like, because there was so much overlap. Not that I'm a detective, but like, it was just like that notion of driving around to problem solve. I feel like so many people do that. Like, you're kind of in a meditative state in many ways when you drive. And so so that felt really natural. And so I just like went around actually, like, I remember I had, when I was pitching on that title, I had a friend who was a really good photographer, and she and I worked together at the time, and I was like, hey, do you want to go out to Discovery Park and take some photos and pitching on this title? And so like we went out to the park, and of course we went after work, and so it got dark, and had no idea around that darn park. It's huge. Like we're like lost in Discovery Park, channeling like a murder.
Right.
Like wasn't a good we all survived, but you know, like we were really there, you know, but it was that, like, I felt really like connected to that title because I got to go and like do things like that, and like explore and kind of get in the mind state and mindset of the character a little bit. And so yeah, so that, you know, that title had a very different process. And then, yeah, we did shoot it in Seattle on like the only sunny day in February. And Aaron, we were like, you know, driving around in the car, and we had a sprinkler on the top of the car, and it was just really fun. You know, it was a great experience, you know, and we like shot down the Ballard Bridge, this like bridge that I go over all the time, but like it became our set, and it was like for like this legit thing. And so it was really fun. Like it was really special in that sense.
You guys did have to fake the Seattle city skyline though, right? For the end shot, because you can't actually see downtown from Discovery Park?
No, Discovery Park, like if you were to kind of go out to the point that we shot that scene at, it would look out kind of into the islands. Seattle's kind of tucked away. behind a little bay or whatever. So yeah, so we composited the city skyline because you really needed that, you know, like and I think that if you were to actually get that city skyline the way that we had it, you'd need to shoot from like West Seattle or like a completely different place.
Yeah.
But like it's one of those things where, you know, you have to take some liberties to tell the story. And in order for anybody to look at that scene, like you really needed to feel the character in that moment of reflection. And for that to translate and connect to the show in a meaningful way, you needed to have the skyline in there. And so we made it work.
Just cheated a little.
Yeah. When we were sharing an office, you also pitched for the True Detective title sequence. And I remember seeing your boards and they were gorgeous and I would have loved to have seen that. But what ended up being the title sequence for True Detective ended up being kind of this really influential style that has still stuck around. People are still emulating it. What is it like to have like an idea that you really love for something and then see what someone else makes with it and how that like lives on? And
yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing when here's the thing, like the main titles and that it's so artistic. I feel like it's just such an art form and it's super competitive, right? Like there's all these like fantastic ideas out there. There's so many different ways to interpret it and, you know, different things that, you know, you choose to push or not push when you're pitching an idea. And, you know, Patrick Clare, you know, developed something beautiful and really poignant for the show and absolutely has like made an impression from a design standpoint on the industry and has, you know, kind of opened up doors for, you know, him to do a lot of amazing work. You know, I think, you know, so I pitched on that title as a, you know, I was a freelancer and that was through the company Leviathan, and they are, you know, a group of incredibly gifted designers and creators. And, you know, I think like I really liked the concept and the titles too, but I think, you know, what Patrick Clare did probably had it one level deeper. Like I do remember like, you know, you kind of get the creative brief or the, you know, the assignment from the client, and True Detective was really different because it was a different set of characters every season. And that was like set up from the very beginning. And so, you know, how you dive into the character aspect was really challenging because it wasn't, the character in many ways was the detective aspect of it, because the place was going to change, the main character was going to change, the storyline was going to change. So what do you latch onto?
Right.
And I think, you know, like I got, you know, like my head was like, oh, you can't show the character because it's going to change. Whereas Patrick Clare said you can't, like he figured out a way to feature the character, to feature the landscape in an iconic look that can take you through different seasons. And so that was like, you know, a really smart approach. And so that's like you know, your role from like a main title designer, especially now where all these different formats and different like stories like take on these crazy, you know, there's just so many different ways of telling a story. And part of your role, if you're going to design the main title for it, is taking that formula in and figuring out something that's going to, like I said before, like your title has to take, you know, it has to work for the longevity of the series. And the longevity of that series meant that it has to work for having a different main character, a different setting, a different storyline. And so he was able to do that because he took like a really interesting look and formula and gave it meaning and attached it to the show in a really cool way.
What was your approach to it?
Gosh, those boards, mine, it featured more of like a landscape that was being like affected and deconstructed and interpreted in like in a visual way. So I think I was taking more of like the, you know, I just remember the look of those boards. It didn't show any faces or any people. It was about the environments and deconstructing them or breaking them apart, like through the lens of a detective. Like there was maybe like meaning within the layers of the show that made it, that kind of gave meaning to the visuals a little bit.
You still have?
I do have those boards. I really liked those boards. It's
I
funny.
loved them.
Like,
I really loved them.
And the thing is like that just like I think they were like a great piece of design, and just because they didn't win doesn't mean that there's not value in those or in through that interpretation. It was just a different interpretation, and and it wasn't right for what the creators were looking for. And who, you know, it's like there's so many different things, and they maybe didn't even like, it could have been right, and then they saw another board that was just a different approach and better.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like that's the, you know, beauty about like what we do as designers and as directors, right? Like directors too, like when I write a treatment, like the level of thought and kind of attention to detail is crazy, because you have like, because you're interpreting something, you're giving like an interpretation of an idea or your perspective on how to execute an idea. And there's, you know, like my idea is going to be really different than what the other director is going to show, because they're a different person. And I, you know, and I think that's what's beautiful about what we do, is that you like, I'm going to take what I myself and like my approach and my process.
I've got a cat here now. Oh, not on the mic. There you go. Oh no.
But yeah, I mean, it's the fact that like our personal experiences and personal approach to things will impact our work and our ideas, and that it's not always going to be right, and like you can't, every job isn't meant for you. And I think that's something that is you know, a harder thing to like learn and accept in our industry, especially as directors. But it's just necessary, right?
Yeah.
Like every job isn't for me.
Yeah.
Or you or anyone.
Yeah, that's definitely something you have to learn pretty quick, is that not to take it personally. And that, you know, it's not that there was anything wrong with the idea that you submitted, it just wasn't what the client was looking for in that moment.
That's right. That's right. And that's it's the balance of being like an artist, designer, director, and putting yourself and your idea, like, you know, putting your full self into an idea, but also understanding that if it doesn't go that, you know, you can't take it personally. You just can't. You gotta have thick skin.
I still have a folder of rejected storyboards that I am fully intending to do animations of myself for my own portfolio. Half of them are your boards that we pitched on projects that didn't get made for various reasons. I mean, sometimes the marketing department of the company got reorganized and they just completely ditched the project altogether, even though it was, man, do you remember those boards for the, like, the cybersecurity? Yeah, those are top of my list. Like, I need to make an animation. Well, thank you so much for chatting about pandemics and title sequences.
Right,
and
lots to catch up on, lots to talk about for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks
I could
for
talk to you for hours
having
and hours.
me.
Well, if this pandemic goes on too much longer, maybe we'll do this again.
For sure. Well, you know, I will be here.
Yes.